Good.
All yours.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the Medical Advisory Board meeting, May 6, 2015. We just came out of executive session, and we also want to confirm that we have a quorum present for this meeting. In executive session, the following positions were approved as panel positions. All were unanimously approved. Dr. Bennett Brown, Dr. Donald Musi, Dr. Mikhail Strutt, Dr. Scott Darling, and Dr. Rufus Sadler. As mentioned, all these physicians were unanimously approved as panel physicians for the New York State Athletic Commission. Also, in executive session, we had a discussion about therapeutic use exemptions for psychostimulants for the treatment of ADHD and other FDA-approved indications for these medications. It was decided that we will consult with the NCAA to determine what approaches may be taken in dealing with this issue, because we perceive that this may be a growing problem in the near future. The next order of business will be a discussion about the suspension form and the possible use of discharge instructions. This was previously discussed at our last Medical Advisory Board meeting, and we didn't really change the form yet. And I guess one question is, how can we change the form in order to deal with suspensions, whether they need medical clearance? Since our last meeting, I've been using our old form, and in selected cases, I've been requiring neurological clearance, and those that have had TKOs or KOs, or those who I've suspected had a significant cerebral injury during a competitive bout. Using the old form, if we put in indefinite suspension with neural clearance, seems to be working okay. But we're obliged by law, though, to have a minimum of 45 days for a TKO and 90 days for a KO. Anyone have any thoughts on this issue? David, is there anything else you wanted to bring up?
Right. I mean, we had a lot of discussion last time about the issue, and Dr. Kendenek had actually suggested that perhaps most or all suspensions should be indefinite suspensions requiring clearance, simply to make sure that the fighter is okay after he suffers whatever injury he suffers. And obviously, for this group, it's a medical issue. There are also other factors involved, such as costs to promoters, of course. But of course, the most important focus is the medical focus and whether that's appropriate for boxers. Another suggestion that had been made to me from the outside, which is really part of this discussion, is if we are doing more than simply telling the fighter you're suspended for 30 days and after 30 days you can come back, what kind of instructions are we giving them at the shows? In other words, are we doing more than giving them simply a suspension form and saying, okay, go home and don't spar and don't box for the next 30 days? Or are we giving them some kind of instruction in the way that a hospital might give patients an instruction, discharge papers? So if someone's being sutured at the event, should we give them some kind of discharge paper saying, this is how you take care of it, this is when you should go back to see a doctor? So that suggestion has been made also, and perhaps that's worth discussing among this group.
Right. In terms of along those same lines, what we have been doing, I'll pass these around. These are head injury cards that we will give boxers who we suspect has sustained a concussion or TKO, KO from head blows. It's in English and Spanish. And it serves to give at least directions for those who've had a head injury. And it says in the bottom, if you experience any of the above symptoms, go to the nearest emergency room for evaluation and contact the New York State Athletic Commission Medical Department. I guess the question comes up, whether we need to do something similar to this for other types of conditions.
Well, isn't the other question about, we have these empiric timelines for return to boxing, but is it the expectation that something like return to play, return to boxing is going to be decided only at the follow-up visit and not before? It's not being empirically advised. It would be in conjunction either with a physician or some sort of training personnel.
I'm not sure if I understand.
Well, the question is, as David was saying, somebody who has a concussion, they're seen by a neurologist, and they're given either a prescriptive plan for how to, gradually return to aerobic, anaerobic, and task-specific skills over the course of days, gradually increasing heart rate and so forth. Is that kind of instruction given to them at any point? Is the onus on us to do that, or is the expectation that's going to be done either by one of the physicians on the MIB, or affiliated with the MIB, or by the patient's own physician at a certain time and follow-up?
It has to be done by the physician they follow up with, simply because at least 50% of our boxers don't reside in New York, mm-hmm. and we have no control over the physicians that they go to. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to have to be on the physician that they follow up with, and I think it's beyond the scope of our charge to train these physicians on how to.
No, I'm not suggesting we do, but is there some sort of language in there to say that you are suspended from boxing for this amount of time, and you should not return until you're formally cleared by your physician?
Right, that's in there. That's basically, with the TKO and the KO, the law states we have to suspend them 45 days for a TKO and 90 days for a KO. So, and those individuals, what I've been doing, so if it's a TKO and I didn't think it was an extremely serious injury, they might not, say if I don't really think they were concussed, I would say 45 days neuroclearance. Now, if I thought it was a significant concussion, I would put TKO 45 days and then put indefinite suspension neuroclearance, meaning that it's a minimum of 45 days, but still, even after 45 days, they can't come back until they get neuroclearance.
So then basically the discharge planning or the follow-up planning happens at that visit and not before.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, get along the same lines as David was mentioning, we can also say that if you have these certain symptoms, go to your doctor immediately. We kind of say that here. We say the emergency room. So, I mean...
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, I'd just like to see a move towards, if there's a medical issue during the fight that requires significant intervention by the ringside, I think that individual needs a follow-up with the physician. And I can't see an instance where, and when so we talked a little bit about simple sutures. You know what? Simple sutures I don't think would qualify. But short of that, if somebody gets a corneal abrasion, I think they should follow up. If somebody gets, I can't really think of anything that would require the ringsides to be involved in the treatment sort of way that shouldn't follow up with a physician. And I think there's tremendous liability on the ringsides if we don't, and I think there's tremendous liability of this board if we don't, because and it's like doing work comp. If somebody needs to document that this person is over the injury, and if there's no documentation of that, say they hurt their knee in this fight, and now 2 years later they're trying to attribute everything to this knee injury that happened, and I think it's protection to the promoters. I think the promoters are that no, I hurt my right knee in 1999, and now it's because of this, and you need to pay for it, and this and that. And so, I mean, I don't know if I'm making sense, but I just can't see an instance where we wouldn't encourage somebody, in fact, mandate someone that if the ring sites render care, that there's some sort of follow-up policy.
And saying that also for sutures, or not necessarily?
No, and that's what I say. I think there is the discretion of the ring side to say this does not require follow-up.
Right. There are certain conditions that probably would not require follow-up.
Nosebleed.
But orbital hematoma that hasn't occluded the eye. Sometimes,
Yeah. So I think it's more the default position is they need follow-up. I think the position that the ring sides would always have the ability to say is this is a minor injury, does not require follow-up, and then, but I think in that instance, then the ring side is really responsible for rendering precautions.
Yeah.
If X, Y, and Z happens, you need to see this person, what have you. So,
are you saying a specific person or their own physician somewhere? Because a lot of these guys, like we were saying, some of them get on. A lot of them get on a plane the next day.
Similar to this
anywhere.
card, similar to this card that they're given our number, but or C. But I really think that.
I agree with some discharge instructions. I think that's good.
I mean, if you can imagine, the ringside physician is to some degree functioning as a makeshift emergency room. And what of those diagnoses would they not say? There's always that follow up with your primary care physician, but the onus is not on the emergency room to make sure that follow through happens, right? And I think I would envision the ringside playing a similar capacity, just not with the bricks and mortar of an emergency room.
No, I think it's exactly the way I look at it.
Since we had our last discussion, I have been requesting more medical clearance on injuries. When I fill out these suspension notices for what I consider were significant injuries. So would someone like to make a motion as to summarizing what you just said, and then and voting on it?
I still propose that we try to come up with a form that we then vote on.
Okay. Do you think we need to change this form? Because the form, as like I said, it could be filled out such that it will accomplish everything you're saying. If we want to go through right now a new form, we can do that too.
Okay, so because the last rendering, I don't have to. The last rendering seemed like it was not.
I think the last time you said that it was in the last rendering.
No, we had two forms last time.
Two, yeah.
One was the old form. This is the old form,
Right.
And then there was a new form.
Yeah,
talking about sparring and not sparring, and
yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
a little too complicated.
Yeah, that was confusing.
Yeah, this is the one. Yeah, so I guess so I think that form's appropriate. I
think the last time the only thing we said was that perhaps they needed like almost everyone who got injured for anything needed a mandatory number of days.
Yeah, if we
correct?
we said indefinite,
yeah,
pending medical clearance, but there's certain conditions where they have to have a minimum of either 45 days and 90 days, TKO and KO.
And then we could just fill in whatever.
Then you can also put in other days. Yeah. That's just giving you a minimum, but for any significant injury, they need medical
I think
clearance.
that's good, but I think that it puts it more on you to enforce that with whoever's being the ringside physicians.
Yeah.
I think we need to actually do a little discussion with them.
Yeah.
But the form does seem to accomplish what
I think
has
it
been
does.
spoken
Yeah.
about in this conversation.
Yeah.
And there is a box, as we've seen, for indefinite suspension, where you would write in that clearance is the end of.
Right. So mostly it's either neuro clearance, ortho clearance, ophthalmology clearance. Those are the major categories. It's ENT clearance sometimes. Someone has had a significant ear, nose, and throat injury.
But how do you go about getting the appropriate? Ortho is different than neuro or eye.
No, we put that clearance in and they suspend it. They can't fight again until they submit that clearance letter.
Well, the problem is that you don't often know there's an orthopedic injury. This is especially relevant to the hand at the time of the fight. Unless you have the ringside doctor go into the locker room and
oh yeah, no, but they do that.
They do that.
They do that.
Yeah.
Everybody's checked after the fight. So if their injury is acknowledged during the examination, then they will be suspended.
And that would cover New York State.
Yeah, all the
You know what I'm talking about, because you may not know that the hand, particularly, you may not know the hand is fractured. You definitely would not know if a tendon is ruptured right after the fight.
But we know if the boxer has pain in the hand, and then if he needs further evaluation. Sometimes we may do it immediately that night, or sometimes we say, look, you got to follow up with your orthopedic surgeon. But the only way that would not be acknowledged by the ringside physician is if the boxer did not disclose it, or tried to hide the fact that they had a hand injury.
Or if they're one, they're not even worried about the hand.
No, they're checked. Everyone's checked.
Right.
Is anything written if their physical afterwards is fine? Is there like any
It's
documentation?
just a checkbox saying they're okay. If there's any injury, it's documented on the accident report form.
we have documentation saying that the fighter has been examined, so every fighter is examined. And as Dr. Jordan said, if there's an injury, an accident report is filled out, and sometimes a suspension notice.
And if they're not, it says they're fine.
Right.
Yeah. Traditionally, we still do, have an accident report form that we would always complete, and that used to serve as a suspension form. This additional form was done so that we can give something to the boxer, so they know that they're suspended and how long. So for the most part, if there's a significant injury, there's usually two forms, that form and then the accident report form.
Okay, there was a card relatively recently at, I think it was Barclay, and I saw two of the fighters, and probably a couple of weeks after the fight, and one ultimately required surgery. The other one should have never been fighting because his hands were so bad to begin with that there's nothing you could do to reconstruct or repair those hands to make them useful as a fighter's hand. His knuckles were like this. He would punch with his, call them PRP joints. And I said, you got to stop fighting. You got an X-ray of his hand, and the MP joints, the knuckles are totally arthritic.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about, right?
I don't know, but we can't discuss it.
Right.
Names or specific cases.
So I guess my motion would be that any boxer suspended for medical reasons requires medical clearance before returning to the sport, unless otherwise cleared by the ringside at the time of injury.
Sounds good. Anyone second that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so let it be noted that was unanimously approved. Great. And the other issue we need to discuss, just have everyone review the minutes from the last MAB meeting of March 11th, 2015.
I move to approve the minutes.
Anyone second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, you noted that the minutes for the MAB meeting of March 11th, 2015 were unanimously approved. Okay. Any new business anybody wants to discuss? David, anything else you want us to discuss there?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion.
Okay, great. Meeting adjourned.